From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up today on AgDay.
I'm Charles Denny. Students at the University of Tennessee's Herbert College of Agriculture learn firefighting techniques, all part of their future working in forestry. That story coming up on AgDay.
We look ahead to spring planting and what we learned from a wild 2019. The Phase 1 deal with China goes into effect this weekend, but there are new concerns about when those big ag buys will happen.
It may not have as big of an immediate impact, like year one impact, as we had hoped.
Good morning, I'm Tricia Sloma. Clinton is on assignment. A White House official says the deadly virus in China could reduce that country's buys of U.S. agriculture this year under the Phase 1 deal. White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien making those comments while speaking to the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. The council is a think tank for international affairs. The comments coming as China reports a drop in the number of new cases of the viral infections, but more deaths. More than 1,000 people are dead and 42,000 sickened by the virus. O'Brien calling the virus a serious situation.
They have a need to import food. We expect that the Phase 1 deal will allow China to import more food and open those markets to American farmers. But certainly, as we watch this coronavirus outbreak unfold in China, it could have an impact on how big, at least in this current year, the purchases are. But I think over time, the Phase 1 deal is a great deal. It may not have as big of an immediate impact, like year one impact, as we had hoped because of the coronavirus.
China's Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs has said the country might have to delay its purchases of some $40 billion in U.S. farm goods because of the virus, but that it would fulfill its commitment within a year. The impact of the coronavirus also showing up in new forecasts from USDA this week, reporting in its latest World Agricultural Supply and Demand estimates a 1 million bale decline in China's expected consumption of cotton, saying it's due in part to the negative economic effects of coronavirus.
They took 1 million bales off of China's cotton consumption estimate. That's got to be because some of the mills have been shut down for a while, and the textile industry is slowing down in China because of the coronavirus. I think that's probably the influence there.
Some people might have been expecting Tuesday's WASDE report to show big changes when it came to exports because of the U.S.-China trade deal, but they weren't there. And USDA officials say that's because the report only shows net exports, not sales to any one country. Plus, the report makes forecasts on a marketing year basis for crops, which ends this summer. But the deal with China is on a calendar year basis.
So any changes in China purchases could occur now, could occur in October or November when we're harvesting our crop.
And that's when prices for most crops would be lower, increasing the chances for sales. A Kansas farmer faces 2.5 years behind bars for federal crop insurance fraud and bankruptcy fraud. 63-year-old Kevin Struss is from Waukene, Kansas. He was also ordered to pay more than $600,000 in restitution. Struss pleaded guilty in October to defrauding the federal crop insurance program. Prosecutors accused him of underreporting his 2015 corn and sorghum crops by more than 54,000 bushels. In the bankruptcy fraud case, Struss was accused of falsely saying he had not transferred property to anyone else, when it's alleged he made 2 transfers for a total of $470,000 to another person in 2018. Another death to report in a grain bin accident, this time in central Illinois. Investigators say the man died after becoming buried in corn while working inside a farm's grain bin in Morrisonville. 61-year-old David L. Lois was pronounced dead at the scene. The county coroner says first responders had to cut a hole in the grain bin to get to Lois, but he died after being submerged in corn. An autopsy shows he died from suffocation after falling into the bin. Heavy rains are continuing to pummel the south and the southeast. Major flooding is reported in areas from Texas to the Carolinas, turning roads into rivers and leaving families with houses full of water. Other parts of the country are dealing with the aftermath of heavy rains from earlier this week. There was a major landslide in Washington County, Pennsylvania, just outside of Pittsburgh. And in Washington state, all roads leading into Mount Rainier National Park are closed after heavy rains caused flooding, mudslides, and damage to the roads. And now, a storm system is expected to bring a band of snow to the Midwest and parts of the Northeast. Meteorologist Cindy Clausen joins us. And Cindy, some areas are bracing for significant snow.
Yeah, and you know, one storm system after another, right? Well, we are looking at a fair amount of snow, especially from the Great Lakes on into the Northeast. Now, this has been the past 24 hours, and you can see a lot of that's been in parts of eastern Missouri, western Illinois. This is just one model, and it's just an estimate. But watch as we add on the next 24 hours. You can see some of that snow, especially now getting into Illinois and Indiana, but then right up along the Great Lakes into the northeastern parts of the United States. This particular model showing many locations in that 4 to 8 inch range of snowfall. And of course, if we get any lake effect, we'll be seeing a little bit more than that. All right, let's switch gears. Some folks are seeing a break in the weather, enough even to continue to work to bring in that harvest. Josh Saylor of Harrod, South Dakota, putting this video on Twitter, and he said, "I thought combining when Christmas music is playing was bad, but hearing Valentine's Day ads on the radio, that takes it to a whole new level." Well, hopefully you'll get lots done while you have this break in the weather. Coming up soon, I'll have your national forecast. Tricia?
The latest and greatest in farm equipment is on display again this year at the National Farm Machinery Show. AgriTalk's Chip Flory is in Louisville for the show, looking ahead to spring planting.
We're here with Ken Ferry, Crop Tech Consulting and Farm Journal agronomist. Last fall was such a tough fall, Ken. What are guys still dealing with through the winter months trying to get ready for this spring?
Yeah, a lot of them are kind of in that recoup mode as far as, in a lot of cases, harvest got pushed back a month, sometimes 2 months. And there's still a lot of work to be done to finish up last year's crop itself. And that might be in machinery and grain moving and everything else. But I think they also got to take time and actually evaluate how they did last year based on what happened and the whole decisions. It's easy to say, screw it, throw it away,
right.
We'll start over. But there's a lot of things can be learned. So this is a good time to be going through the yield maps as they look through that and look for, what would we do different in the future,
right.
and making plans for next year. But just forgetting about it probably is a mistake.
Yeah, everybody wants to throw, not everybody, but a lot of people want to throw 2019 away. That's making a mistake because you hope 2019 never happens again, but it might.
It might, and there's a lot of things that can be learned even though it was an off year, just like a drought year, and you look at your herbicide performance and your hybrid performance, they all need to be evaluated so you know what you can do going forward if something like this happens again.
That's right. Okay, you got to make preps off the tough years for the good years ahead. This is Ken Ferry. I'm Chip Flory reporting from the National Farm Machinery Show down in Louisville.
Thanks, guys. Still ahead, we keep the planting conversation going with a look at cotton for 2020. And later, why this fire was deliberately set and what it's hoped students will learn from it. Ahead in the country. A program designed to help curb the hiring of undocumented immigrants in Florida is moving a step closer to reality. Florida lawmakers are working on a bill that would require private companies in the state to verify each new hire's eligibility to work in the U.S. They would use approved systems similar to E-Verify. But in a Senate committee, changes were made to the bill. It will now be deployed over 2 years. Plus, it exempts small businesses and agriculture. The changes come after growers complained they were struggling to find farm workers as the unemployment rate reaches record lows. The legislature still needs approval in both the Florida House and Senate. Producers are trying to make planting decisions right now. Could cotton be a good bet in 2020? We have more from this year's Top Producer Summit and Clinton Griffiths.
We're here at Top Producer Summit with Ashley Arrington, Agri Authority. Ashley, let's talk about some of the southern crops, in particular cotton, because we're going to be making some planting decisions. How are the markets stacking up for cotton this year?
We have rebounded some from the 60-cent level, and we spent a good bit of time in the 60 to 65 cent range. We hit 70, but that still isn't that exciting. And it doesn't pencil. I mean, you have to be to the point where it's profitable, and that isn't profitable for a lot of farmers in the South. So you have to really evaluate where you're going to plant. We start planting corn in March in the South, so if you're going to irrigate, that's a decision you have to make sooner rather than later. Yeah, we don't plant cotton until May, but if we're going to rotate, then we got to go ahead and start making some decisions. I was hearing more peanuts and corn a couple weeks ago, but we have got back up to the 70-cent range. If we push back towards 75 cents, that may deter some acres from getting left out.
Well, you know it's expensive to have all the equipment for cotton. I mean, you know, those big stripper balers cost a lot of money, and you've got to put cotton acres out there. Is that part of this consideration of, you know what, we went to cotton a couple years ago, now we got to stay in it here for a little while?
Absolutely. You can't let a big piece of equipment like that sit idle, and that's at the front of a lot of farmers' minds. Yeah, I have to plant some, so they're not going to completely drop off cotton, but they will probably decrease acres some and maybe move around into the peanut, corn, maybe even some bean areas, just for the simple fact of it's just not as profitable, but they still have to utilize that equipment.
Yeah, are gents moving cotton right now?
They're moving some, and another thing, you know, with cotton that comes is when you're thinking about 60 to 65 cents, even 70, ginning costs more these days than it used to. Usually cottonseed would pay for your ginning. That's not the case in a lot of places now. If it costs you 3 to 5 cents, 70 cents actually is 67 cents or more. Yeah, 67 or less because your ginning's more.
Right, right. So that's all part of this conversation, which we're going to have to make some decisions here in the next few weeks, right?
Yes, it's critical that we're going to make the decisions in the next couple of weeks because corn seed's about to get ordered.
All right, sounds good. Appreciate it, Ashley. We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
For market insights and farm debt analysis, contact Ashley Arrington at 706-699-4543 or visit agriauthority.com. Join Andrew McCrae for Farming the Countryside, a farmer-focused podcast all about production agriculture. Brought to you by Pivot Bio Proven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, weather or not. Visit pivotbio.com.
Well, it sure has been soggy to the southeast, but now we get to talk about snow in the northeast.
Yeah, well, 'tis the season, but yeah, the focus has really been on the southeast for the past several days. Lots of rain there and flooding, but now we're talking more of the white stuff today. Let's take a look. We've been watching both of these systems over the past couple of days. Here's the one that was bringing all of that rain to the southeast. You can still see, we are still seeing some rain in the southeastern part of the country. That low will eventually push off to the Atlantic Ocean. Now we have that secondary low pressure system in front that was coming from the north, so much colder air behind that. Wait till you see the temperatures. Now that low is going to be moving across the Great Lakes. Now this front will eventually be weakening because this is the more dominant front, but we're going to see that snow all along that front from the Great Lakes on into the northeast today. Notice the much more quiet weather in the western half of the country as we head through today. Now there will be some areas with some snow, and we'll see some more rainy and upper elevation snow coming into the northwest, but really it's the eastern half of the country, almost eastern quarter of the country, that's going to be the focus today for that precipitation. So the low moves off into the ocean. We still have the trailing cold front in parts of the southeast. Look at that snow as this front doesn't make a lot of movement, but again, it is going to continue to weaken. Lake effect snow on the back side of that low pressure, but high pressure and very cold air for the north central United States, the cooler air all the way down into parts of the southern plains. We'll start to see more rain and snow into the northwest as another system moves in there. We'll see most of this moving out of the southeast. Still some rain left in parts of Florida, and we start to see that snow clearing out as well, except for parts of the Great Lakes and some parts of the Appalachians. All right, let's take a look at how we are shaping up as we get into Friday, and that high pressure moves on off to the east, so most of the eastern part of the country is going to be in the clear, and in fact it's going to be a more quiet day as we get into especially the second part of Friday. So as far as precipitation, the past 24 hours have been extremely wet for parts of the southeastern United States. We're going to continue that rain and then even snow up in the northern parts of the eastern half of the country. So you can see the dominant area is going to be in the east as far as that rain. And the snow, well, this is our in-house model, and you can see it shows a lot of those areas, at least 2 to 4, but I think we're going to be seeing over 4 in some of these areas, especially really close to the Great Lakes. All right, here's a look at those temperatures. High of 4 below zero in Minneapolis today. That is very cold air right here in the north central United States. And look at what happens when we get into the overnight hours. Those lows getting near to 20 below zero. And then then as we head into tomorrow, we see that cold air starting to push further to the east. It's still pretty cold, but at least a little bit better as you get towards the Great Lakes. Now, quick check of the jet stream. There's that trough. That's going to be moving off to the east. We see another trough that's coming in for the weekend. Not quite as deep, but it gets interesting next week. We get a trough in the west, but then watch this. We get a cutoff low. So while we look at warmer air there, could get some stormy weather in the southwest with some colder air in the northeast. That's a look at your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Caliente, Nevada, abundant sunshine for you today and a high of 56 degrees. Cold Spring, Minnesota, sunny and frigid. Those wind chills 25 to 35 below. And Warm Springs, Georgia, rain is likely with falling temperatures.
Legislators in Maryland take on the battle over what qualifies as meat. And a shocker at the Fort Worth Stock Show. What this year's winner might say about the whole industry, next in Drovers. Maryland is working on some rules when it comes to what foods can be labeled as meat. Food made of animal tissues cultured from cells outside of the original animal or made from plants or insects could not be labeled as meat under the plan. It's a Republican-backed bill in the Maryland General Assembly. The senator sponsoring it calls it truth in advertising. But a leader with the Plant-Based Foods Association calls the bill unnecessary, saying that members are in full compliance with all federal rules already. Quite the moment at the Fort Worth Stock Show last week after the grand champion steer was announced. And for the first time since 1982, it wasn't a crossbred. It was a purebred, a Hereford. The winning steer named Cupid Shuffle, and it was owned by 12-year-old Ryder Day of Lubbock, Texas. Drovers reports the choice is regarded by many in the industry as a milestone because they believe it proves purebred cattle breeders have listened to consumers and have made genetic improvements and suggest purebred steers may now be on an equal plane with crossbreds. Cupid Shuffle went for $300,000 at the premium sale. Ryder says the money will go to fund his education. Still ahead, fighting fires to protect nature. See what these foresters of the future are doing by getting some hands-on learning. Next. Becoming a forester can include preparing for a dangerous situation. Forestry students at University of Tennessee's College of Agriculture receive hands-on firefighting training as part of their academics. Charles Denny reports on what they learn and how these skills could be used to protect nature.
Fire crackling, a spreading blaze as flames sweep across a dormant field. But this fire was deliberately set, part of a realistic training exercise for students in UT's Herbert College of Agriculture and Forestry. Today, their classroom is the Forks of the River Wildlife Area in Knoxville.
So we're real proud of it at the University of Tennessee that we have this partnership. We're able to get the students this kind of training because they're going to be working in fire more than likely in a career.
Professor Chris Graves says this is much more than resume building. Students earn a lifetime federal certification to be basic wildland firefighters, the training done by the U.S. Forestry Service and Tennessee Division of Forestry. Before the students reached this point, they spent a week doing other training that included how weather impacts firefighting, securing fire lines, use of equipment, and safety. Firing! Here at the Firing Devices Station, students learn to start fires with flare guns. Kennedy Calloway is on hand, interested in wildlife rehab. We've all seen the horrific images from Australia, and Kennedy says this training could help her save animals someday.
So I think it's important that we, think of every aspect of how fire affects not just us and our homes, but also the animals and their habitat.
Students also see how fire, prescribed burns, can be a natural management tool. Sometimes you burn on purpose to prevent more damage. If ground is already charred, a destructive wildfire has nothing to grab onto. Ecosystems need fire.
But fire's just as important as the wind and the rain. But we need to educate the public and do a better job of that, about the importance of fire, and then also train our students so that they can go on and put more fire on the ground in a controlled manner.
Dozens of UTIA students were certified firefighters by day's end. The power of fire can be devastating and helpful. That's what these students learn here, that either way, fire is a force that must be contained. This is Charles Denny reporting.
Well, that's all the time we have this morning. We're so glad you could tune in. Clinton will be back tomorrow. For all of us here at Ag Day, I'm Tricia Sloma. Have a great day.